three others as we go through the day. Again, my name's Blake Thompson from BET Broadcast Engineering. I'm the chairman of the planning committee, so we helped come up with this stuff. And actually, this session was one of the ones that was presented, and we were real happy to get it because, we like coming up with some of these things, but it's really nice when we can get a good program that is presented to us and we go, that's exactly what we're looking for. So this is one of those. I hope you get a chance to check out some of the other sessions later today. Make sure you get your business cards in if you haven't already for the prize drawing later this afternoon. That'll happen just before the final general session. So, if you're not here, we're going to call another name. So make sure you stick around for that. And this one is called Radio Broadcasters and the Digital Dashboard, presented by David Layer, who is Vice President of Advanced Engineering at the National Association of Broadcasters. David's been with the NAB since 1995, has been active in the radio technology and standard setting area. His current role includes serving as a project manager for technology projects being conducted by Pilot, formerly the NAB Labs, and as a principal administrator of NAB Radio Technology Committee. That's a group of technical executives from the NAB member companies that advise NAB on technology development and technology regulatory matters. He's been received the Radio World's Excellence in Engineering Award and was recognized by Radio Inc. as one of the top 10 best engineers in radio. He also received the Consumer Electronics Association Technology Leadership Award, and the IEEE BTS also gave him the Matty Sekula Memorial Award for Best Paper at their 2014 symposium. So we're real pleased David's here to speak us today and update us on the latest developments on vehicle dashboards and how radio broadcasters can use that to their best advantage. David Layer.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, and thank you for choosing my session. I know you had a choice. I feel like I'm the airline now. Isn't that what they always say? You have a choice of airlines, and thanks for choosing us. It's great to be here. I get to speak at state association meetings from time to time, and I always look forward to it. I've never actually worked at a broadcast facility, so it's really important for me to help me do my job to actually get out among the real radio engineers. So Chris, Blake, everybody, thanks for letting me be on your program today. I just want to find out, are you all in the room radio broadcasters primarily? So mostly. Here's another question for you. Have any of you purchased a new car in the last year? Because what I'm going to be showing you today is a lot about, car radios. And they've really changed a lot. And I just bought a new car a couple weeks ago, and I'm just amazed at the capabilities of the radio in this vehicle. If you're really curious about radio and the digital dash, one thing you might do is, buy a car or just go test drive a car. Go to a car dealership and look at some of these vehicles. So let me just start off by setting the stage here. Earlier this week, there was a meeting in Berlin of the World DAB General Assembly, and this is something that I just read in the trade press this morning. There's a company called Radio Player. They do hybrid radio, which is, of course, the combination of over-the-air and internet radio in a receiver. And Radio Player does streaming audio players for smartphones, and they're also providing hybrid radio data to automobiles. And here is a prototype reference radio design that they just introduced at World DAB General Assembly the other day. Let's see if this pointer works here. How? So the interesting thing about this player that they just introduced is that it doesn't display content by band. Like, you don't pick the AM band and then scroll through the AM stations or the FM band. It's just it's all mashed up together. So these icons along the bottom, these favorites, one might be a stream, one might be FM, and this was in Europe, so one might be DAB. So this is one of the changes we're seeing in radio designs in cars, is it's getting less and less about which band you're listening to and more about the content. So here's another slide for setting the stage. This is a photograph of a radio display in an Audi that Audi came to Washington and was testing some of their new technology, and I had the opportunity to go out with them. This is, I'm tuned here to 820 kilohertz WWFD AM. This is the first and only radio station in the U.S. that's broadcasting an all-digital radio signal. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about WWFD later in the presentation. But the thing to notice here is this is an AM station. It's got metadata, song title and artist, and it has album art. And the way the receiver in this Audi works is it has a built-in artwork database. So WWFD isn't transmitting the artwork over the HD radio signal, and it's not coming in on a mobile broadband connection either. It's in the receiver. So the receiver sees the metadata, and it goes to the receiver, the artwork database, and it pulls that artwork up and displays it, and it happens very fast. So I think this is a pretty exciting slide because it shows AM really on parity with the other services, and it sounded really good too. Now, WWFD is only broadcasting what's called the core all-digital signal, which does not support a true stereo audio channels, but it sounds, a lot better than a staticky old analog AM signal would. So my last display slide here is again from this new Audi, and this is showing the guide because again the radio displays. This particular radio is showing the guide based on the band, but what you notice here is that the multicast channels are in the same guide and they look the same as the main channels do. And I want to call attention in particular to this entry, because if you look at that closely, you'll notice that it's a little confusing because it says 107.7 WWWT on the first line, but then on the second line it says 102.9. And that, of course, is because what this broadcaster is doing is they're rebroadcasting their other station, 102.9, on the HD radio multicast channel. And if you go to their webpage, this is what you see, and they talk about that, how they're doing this rebroadcasting. So the point I'm trying to make with this slide is things are getting a little confusing for consumers, and this is something that broadcasters need to think about. There's a lot of debate about how multicast channels are presented in receivers, and there's really no consensus. The way it's done is like this, and I don't imagine that that's probably going to change in the near future. But this world of the digital dash and these new radios, things are getting a little more complicated than they used to be. So the last thing here as introductory material I wanted to share with you this morning is some information on the cars sold in Ohio that have HD radio technology in them. Xperi, the company that designed and develops, it continues to develop HD radio, has hired a company to compile this data. And I'm just going to let you look at this for a second. I'm assuming there's people here from all over the state, so hopefully you'll see your market up there on the slide. And in case you were wondering, this is the kind of receiver penetration for digital radios that exists in cars today. And you see it looks like the Cleveland has the highest percentage, almost 20%. And that when the column that says all cars, that means of all the cars on the road. It's not just 20% of cars sold in the last year or whatever. It's looking at the universe of cars that are on the road in Cleveland. So this is encouraging. Of course, one of the things I'm going to try and get to this morning is the idea of broadcasters turning their analog off and using an all-digital signal. And of course, that cannot happen until there are enough receivers in the marketplace so that you don't lose all your listeners. So, we're making progress, and these are the numbers, and these slides will be made available to your attendees, Blake, I believe. So So if you want to go back and look at these numbers later, you'll be able to do that. So that's kind of my introduction, just trying to set the stage for what radio looks like in today's cars and some of the ways that it's different. What I'm going to do in the next, I guess I have about a half hour here, and I'm probably going to run out of time. I always have more material than I can present, it seems like. I want to just talk a little bit about NAB, just so you know who I am and where I work and what NAB is doing. Excuse me. We have a project at NAB. It's called our Auto Initiative, and it involves NAB reaching out to automakers and reminding them how important radio is, because it's getting very complicated in cars now. You have so many different options. That's really what that first panel this morning was about. There's all these different ways now for people to obtain audio content. So the purpose of NAB's Auto Initiative is to make sure that automakers understand the importance of radio, how much consumers like radio, and really what we want to do is we want to work with the auto companies to make sure that the radio implementations in the future are good for everybody, good for automakers, good for broadcasters, and good for listeners. So I'll just give you a little insight into how we're trying to make that come about. So very briefly, I'm an engineer. I work at NAB. Blake mentioned I've been there since 1995. It's a neat job. I get to do a lot of cool different things. Come to state associations is very high on my list. We have 8 engineers. I'm the guy who spends the most time doing radio stuff. The rest of the team is involved in the conference planning, working on the trade shows. ATSC 3.0 is a very big initiative in our department, and I guess there's a session going on right now about that. We have something called Pilot, and well, let me just show you this picture. This is our staff. I don't know if Sam has ever come out to Ohio to talk to the organization, but you should definitely get him out here. He's a really neat guy. So I've been with NAB since '95. I used to work for a satellite company designing modems. Mostly, as Blake mentioned in my bio, I work with the technology committees. I do projects. I manage projects for Pilot. Pilot is our technology initiative. And here's the slide that I was going to show us a second ago. I encourage you to visit this website. It talks about the different projects that Pilot's been working on. One of the things that we're trying to do with Pilot is seed technology, find interesting startup companies that have technology which is useful to broadcasters and help them along. So it's a really neat initiative that we have going there. So, enough about NAB. Let me talk for a few minutes about our auto initiative. This is something that our NAB is governed by a board of directors, and it's a big board. It's like 50 people, and there's someone from Ohio probably is on the board, right? And there's different districts, and the board members get elected by the NAB members in that district. And a couple of years ago, the board approached NAB, and they said, you've really got to reach out to the automakers. We see things changing in the car, and we want to make sure that radio maintains its prominence and is improved, because with all this new technology, there's 2 ways to look at the delivery of mobile broadband in the vehicle. One is it's a threat, right? Because now there's more competition, but it's also an opportunity, because that same technology that's bringing the competitors into the vehicle is also available to broadcasters. And that's where hybrid radio comes in. There's a lot of good things that broadcasters can do with hybrid radio. So, one of the main focuses of this project is to make sure we take advantage of those opportunities. So how are we doing that? We're trying to get to know the auto companies, and we're doing a pretty good job of it, I think, if I do say so myself. What we've discovered is a couple interesting things. One is broadcasting is kind of a fragmented industry, right? There's thousands of broadcasters, different companies doing different things. And, working at NAB is often an exercise in herding cats, because people want to do different things. They don't agree. Sometimes NAB can't take positions at, in filings at the FCC because our members are just too divided on what the right thing to do is. Well, what we've discovered is the auto industry is a lot like that. So we're kind of kindred spirits. I think that they recognize that about us, just like we've recognized that about them. So it means there's a lot of work because we're reaching out to a lot of different companies. Some of these companies, you see some car company logos here. There's also some logos of organizations you might not be as familiar with. Harman, it turns out. Harman is a so-called Tier 1 manufacturer. The car companies don't actually build their own head units. The boxes with the radio and the technology that's available in the car. They create a spec and then they go out to companies like Harman. Panasonic is another big Tier 1 provider. So it's important for us to reach out to them as well because they're the companies that are actually producing the hardware that goes into the car. So we've been reaching out to the car companies. We've been going to auto trade shows, which has been was pretty cool. I mean, I like cars anyway, and some of these auto trade shows are really a lot of fun. One of them here, I've got up here, the SEMA show. That is the aftermarket auto trade show, and it's crazy. It's, there's all the custom cars that people like to make. They do the crazy paint jobs, and it used to be that aftermarket radio was a significant part of the SEMA show. But one of the things that's it's very obvious when you go to SEMA now is that industry has really kind of gone away. And if anybody who's been in a new car recently, or probably I guess I have a car that's I bought in 2013, so that's 5 years ago. Probably go back farther than that. The dashes are the radio is so integrated into the vehicle that you really don't have an opportunity to put in an aftermarket radio like you used to. So we've been reaching out to these folks. In June of last year, we were actually able to hold a workshop with broadcasters and automakers. It was part of an event called TU Automotive. Here's some pictures of our workshop had about 80 people in it, mostly automakers, because the TU Automotive show is located in Novi, Michigan, which is just outside of Detroit. So we sponsored a reception to try and get to know these folks. Here's some of our people. Steve Newberry, who's Executive Vice President of Special Projects at NAB. My boss, Sam Matheny. And this, John Vermeer is with iHeart. Mike Cooney is CTO of Beasley. We brought all these folks to this event, and it was great. I mean, in fact, after this workshop, GM approached us, and a couple weeks later, we were out at the GM Design Center in Warren, Michigan, because they wanted to hear more about our ideas for car radios. So it's a worthwhile effort, and nothing happens quickly. And it turns out that when a car maker decides to put a new radio in a car, it's like 3 years before it actually gets into the car. They finish the design, and then 3 years later, the new radio shows up. So, it's important for us to be doing this now. We want to get as involved as we can, because we know that there's going to be a delay between when we've actually had an impact on the radio design and when it starts showing up in showrooms. So another thing that we've been doing as part of our auto initiative is we have been participating in hackathons for auto apps. Now everybody knows about apps for your smartphone. Many cars have apps now too, and it's the apps that are specific to a kind of vehicle. Like General Motors has a system called NGI, Next Generation Infotainment, and there are apps for that system, but they're not Android apps, they're not Apple apps, they're GM apps. So our thinking is that by participating in these hackathons, and we learn about how the car systems work, we meet the automakers, and we also hopefully energize the other participants to think about, when they're developing apps, incorporating radio functionality into those apps. So there's two two categories of apps in the cars. There's the projected apps, which a good example of that is CarPlay. If you have Apple CarPlay and you get into a car that's CarPlay compatible, you can project the apps from your smartphone onto the screen in the dashboard. So you can use your maps and your navigation from your smartphone. You can, if you have iHeart Radio app on your smartphone, you can project it into the vehicle. And then the other kind is embedded apps, which are actually built into the car. And what we've discovered is that the automakers are more inclined to like the projected apps because you can make updates. You can change things much more easily when the app is residing in your smartphone. I think we all know our smartphones are updating all the time, right? Our apps are updating all the time. So when the car makers build apps into the vehicle, that becomes more difficult because it's harder to, or impossible to update them. And they're in there for a long time. So it's not as good of an approach. So let me just show you a couple of the different apps that we've developed as part of these hackathons. This one over here this was a radio app. I'm going to just show you how that worked. We did an app which was focusing on safety. One of the things broadcasters are talking about a lot is how important radio is in times of emergency. And so we developed an app which focused on that. The hybrid app that we developed, it displayed the stations by genre. You'd select a genre, and then you would get a list of stations to choose from. It had the ability to provide images for advertisements, perhaps, or a station logo, or an album art type of image. Just for fun, we incorporated a station's Twitter feed into the display, and you can do that when you have a mobile broadband connection to the vehicle. You can connect the listener to Facebook too. You can like a song and have it show up on your Facebook page. And I don't think that's something I would ever do, but apparently, a lot of people like to do that sort of thing. We also made it so that the head unit could read the tweet, and because of course driver safety is very important when you're building things for the car. So this is one example. We did another app for Ford vehicles at a Ford hackathon. The Ford system is of the projected variety, so the app actually resides in the handset of your smartphone, and then you get into the car and the smartphone links to the vehicle, and then you can see the app on the dash. So this is an example of it was a similar thing. We developed an app which provided album art, just like what people are expecting, because when people listen to a service like SiriusXM or Pandora, and these are the kinds of features those services have, broadcasters need to be going in that direction as well, because otherwise they don't look as good. The other services look better, and people may decide, well, we like those features, and we're going to just listen to those other services. So on this one, we had the usual metadata. Because it's connected to the smartphone, you have the ability to make phone calls. So behind this app is a database, and one of the items in the database was the station phone number. So you could just easily reach out to the station. Again, this organized the stations by genre. So you could easily switch to another station of the same genre. And of course, a menu button to take you back to the home screens. So these are prototype apps. These are not apps that people are going to be able to use in their cars. These are just, the automakers do these hackathons because they want people to think about ideas at how their systems might be used. So, and as I mentioned before, we like participating in these because it gives us more insight into how the digital dash works. And it raises the visibility of broadcasting with the automakers. And we're doing more. We're doing next, I guess it's right after the week after Thanksgiving. There's another hackathon out in LA. So we're going to continue to pursue those types of activities. So are there any questions? I'm just talking at a mile a minute here. So I should stop and see if there's a question. Yes?
David, I have two sons that are engineers in the automotive industry. One is an engineer for Honda, and the other one's an engineer for Ford in the modem area. So
Okay.
he's very into this.
Yeah.
And he's constantly lamenting the fact that the software in modems, it's hard to update the field because there's always changes being made.
Yep.
Users have to take it into the dealer to have it updated for the latest features or bug fixes. But he said that, or what I wanted to ask was, you mentioned that first radio there that had the album art.
Yeah.
What's the plan to update that? I mean, it's great now, the database is fine when it comes out of the factory. What's the?
I can answer that. Because as I mentioned, Audi came to Washington with their car, and so I spent a day with the Audi engineers driving around D.C. What their database does is when you get that metadata and you go search for the image, if it doesn't find it, it downloads it. Because these are Audis, they have a service called Audi Connect. These cars, more and more vehicles are being sold with their own mobile broadband connections. So if a song is playing that it doesn't have the artwork for, it goes out and gets it using this Audi Connect service, and then it stores it. And they were joking because they were making fun of broadcasters because they said, we know if they're playing this song once, they're going to be playing it again, and they don't want to have to keep going out to fetch the artwork. So that's their plan. I mean, an Audi, I will say that of all the automakers we've worked with, Audi seems to be the most committed to radio. They really spend a lot of time and effort designing good radio services for their vehicles. And, they're very supportive of radio. They're not looking to replace radio with their own streaming service like apparently Tesla is. Tesla apparently has their own streaming service, and they want their drivers to, their customers to use that instead of radio. So
They also planning to update their apps on the radio, so you don't have to have it tethered to your smartphone to keep the.
well, the Audi that I've been talking about is not tethered to a smartphone. It's because it is a smartphone. I mean, the car is a smartphone basically. So and it's not cheap. I mean, because you pay a subscription fee. I think the Audi Connect, the full Audi Connect, is like $30 a month. So maybe if someone's buying an Audi, which is kind of a high-end car, they don't care. They don't mind paying for that. But I think that I'm not sure that model works across every style of vehicle. I think that the intro brands are not going to be able to do that kind of thing. So.
I believe I heard the other day, or this morning maybe or somewhere, Tesla is doing away with the AM part of the radio.
Yep, that's right, and that's something we talk about a lot. And Audi, it turns out, I keep talking about Audi because I've spent so much time with these radio engineers at Audi. They're coming out with a car called the e-tron, which is a all-electric SUV. They're going to start selling them this month, and that doesn't have AM either. And the radio engineer buddies of mine said that they tried and tried to get the AM to work, and it just the interference from the electric motors was just too hard to overcome. And I have a theory, though. I think that the problem is that, the radio department's working on the radio, and the electric motor department, is working on the electric motor, and they don't talk to each other, or else the radio guys call up the electric motor guys and say, hey, you need to, suppress the noise here, and they say, yeah, right, sure, and they just hang up on them. So that's going to be now there are some electric cars, the Chevy Bolt, which Bolt with a B. It's their newest electric car. It's a small, it's a neat car. It won the Motor Trend Car of the Year award, I think, when it came out. That has AM. and the Nissan Leaf, which is just very similar to the Bolt in size and cost, also has AM. So, but BMW, none of the BMW electric cars have AM. Tesla is now apparently, I think the Model S had it, but they're going to get rid of it in a future upgrade. So that's a problem. Yes. Question, sir?
You mentioned before that some of the previous conferences or something with the automotive manufacturers and third party.
The tier one
Yes.
manufacturers, yes.
I guess my thought was, have you ever, I mean, I know you work directly with auto manufacturers. Have you considered reaching out to some of these third-party manufacturers? Because I know you mentioned that the process for making these is more and more becoming streamlined. But
Yeah, it
I
is.
know that, at least overseas, there's a lot of third-party manufacturers that design things specifically to be removed and replaced with aftermarket radios, and many of them have full-fledged Android operating systems and software-defined radios built in. They're quite advanced, and they're a lot more nimble than the 3-year cycle of the automotive radio.
Well, first thing is I can tell you that we're talking a lot. We're actually working more closely, perhaps, with some of the tier one folks than we are with the automakers because they're the ones who build the radios. Another thing I can say is that these automakers have global businesses, and they want to design radio that will work all around the world. And so we've picked up on that, and we've been reaching out to the European Broadcasting Union and North American Broadcasters Association and other groups to let them know about our initiative and basically get them on board. Because we know that the car maker, if broadcasters, as a group, are working with car makers and talking about international solutions to receiver designs, then that's going to be of much greater use to them than if everybody's coming up individually. But as far as the, being able to do aftermarket technology in cars, I just haven't seen very much of that anywhere. I mean, I was at the Detroit Auto Show last year, and I spent a day and a half looking at every car, every line at least, not every vehicle, but I went Toyota, Lexus, Nissan, Chevy, Buick, Audi, all Mercedes, and I created a spreadsheet. I think I had over 40 vehicles on my spreadsheet, and they were all of the radios in these vehicles were so highly integrated that I can't imagine how you would, get an aftermarket radio into those things. And they're good products. Like the car I drive most is a Hyundai, and it's a pretty economical car. It's got a great radio in it. I don't want to replace it. So there is that. So. Okay, I'm going to keep. Oh, go ahead, sir. I always like to answer questions.
Many years ago, didn't the FCC require AM radio receiver manufacturers to provide FM reception? Is that kind of regulation gone way?
Yes, and I that was before my time. I wasn't in the radio industry back then, and I do believe that's true. That when the FM band was just starting up, as it were. It must have been in maybe the 50s or the 60s, because it wasn't until, and this always surprises me, but it wasn't until the mid-1970s that FM listening surpassed AM listening. So, but I think there was a time when manufacturers were required to include FM in their radio receivers, but I don't believe there's any rules that are in effect like that today. There's a rule similar to that in TV. It's called the All TV Receiver Act, where if televisions over a certain size have to include ATSC tuner in them. So, but that's something that it's not likely. That's really not a good approach to. It's not a market-based approach, and I can tell you that in our work at NAB. We're oftentimes thinking about, well, like FM chips in smartphones is a good example. some broadcasters think that NAB should be lobbying the government to mandate FM chips in smartphones. But we've never done that, and we don't think it's smart. We think a much better approach is to work, a market-based approach where, for whatever reason, the smartphone manufacturers see it in their own best interest to incorporate the chips. Because when you mandate something, people get upset. It can backfire. So I don't expect that that's going to be, and especially, I think we're even farther away from that sort of policy because there's so many options, and mobile broadband is really becoming a big factor. And again, the panel that we just sat through earlier this morning, that's all they were talking about is using Alexa to deliver content. And so but again, it's not just a threat, it's also an opportunity, and that's what we're focusing on, is the opportunities that we have here. So, well, I'm looking at my time, and I'm really glad I started asking for questions, but I am going to run out of time here. And I think what I'm going to do, there we go. I think the most interesting topic we have to hear about today is this all-digital AM station in Frederick. So I'm going to talk about that for the few minutes I have remaining here. I'll wait for the screen to come back. This is a clip out of Radio World from back in July, where they announced that they went all digital. And again, this is the screen. I mean, this is what this station looks like if you're in an Audi driving around, the Washington D.C. area. And this kind of tees up a big question for the industry. Up until now, this is my one slide history of radio. It's lots of different things have happened. We had AM, we had FM. Now we have digital HD, but those all have analog components to them. And all digital is something different. And we all know how the world has gone digital. Pretty much everything is digital now. Cameras, phones. Digital is usually you can do things better digitally than you could analog. So it's a fair question. Will radio ever go all digital? Now for AM, here's just a comparison of the various signals that we have today. This is the analog signal. Here's how broadcasters broadcast. It's called hybrid IBOC. That's confusing because we also talk about hybrid when we're thinking about mobile broadband. This is not a very popular service. Many broadcasters put this on the air and didn't like it and took it down. So, but the all digital AM is another matter. It really works well, and it's receivable. I started off my talk today by showing you that slide of the receiver penetration in Ohio. Well, all those cars can receive this all digital AM signal because it's been built into the technology from the start. Now, Norway, if you're in the radio industry, you can't but hear about how Norway went all digital last year. And it's no more FM in Norway. Turns out in Europe, AM isn't a very widely used service anyway. So we're really just talking about FM transitioning to the transition away from FM. Depending upon who you talk to, it's either been really successful or it hasn't been successful. So, it is happening someplace in the world. There's other countries that are also thinking about going all digital. As I mentioned, the HD radio system is designed to go into this all digital mode. So, and then it's, here we go. Again, this is just another slide kind of showing where we are in the transition and showing that the number of receivers that are in the marketplace is increasing. And now, going forward, we're at about 50% of cars sold today have HD radio. That number's just going to be increasing. So why would you want to go all digital? Well, for AM, All digital can solve some problems. It can reduce interference. It can provide more parity with these other services. Think about that slide that I've shown of the receiver display. And this is an important point too, I think, is that the decision to go all digital may be different for the AM band than it is for the FM band. The FM band it would be very hard to imagine FM broadcasters wanting to turn off their analog signal. It's a good service. It's making good money. AM though is a little different. AM is more of a struggling service. And this is, I'm just about done here, but this is really kind of my key point in discussing what's happening at WWFD, and that is that this is one of those AM stations that has an FM translator. So because of that, now their AM signal can only be received by people who have HD radios. But people with analog radios can still receive the station, except it's on FM. So perhaps the proliferation of FM translators for AM is providing a transition strategy for AM broadcasters. Now, this is I'm going to just zip through here. I'm going to get to I have a coverage slide that I want to show you, and then I think I'll probably stop. This is just a picture of the facility in Frederick. It's a pretty straightforward configuration in the transmitter configuration. This station was particularly well suited for going to all digital because for many years it's been a test station for Ubiquiti/Xperi. And that's where, and Xperi was instrumental in deploying this all digital signal. So here's how this is the coverage of the AM station. And I'm going to show you here, good coverage. This is a close-up. Here's the close-up. Frederick, Maryland is the city of license. And I'm going to superimpose on top of that the translators coverage contours. So you can see they're a lot smaller, not surprising, right? Translators are limited to 250 watts. This is a 5 kilowatt AM station. But I'm going to go back and forth here. It does a good job of covering their city of license. So, I think most of their listeners are in Frederick, so most of their listeners are being served by the translator. And then the other thing to look at, too, is the nighttime coverage. And, that's doing an even better job of replicating the service that they get with their AM station. And, nighttime AM reception is kind of dodgy anyway because of the skywave interference. So it's a work in progress. NAB is looking for other AM stations who are interested in doing an experimental use of all digital because this is being done under experimental authority. The FCC has not authorized all digital AM as a service. But if we can get some stations on the air and their experience is good, then we'll have an opportunity to go to the commission and get them to authorize it so that even more stations can start heading in that direction. So I see I'm out of time. So I'm stop. I apologize for not getting through more of my material. Do we have time for one last question, or are you gonna cut me off?
One last quick one.
Any last quick questions? Yes.
David, can you speak to the NAB's efforts to encourage auto manufacturers to include HD in their radios?
Well, sure. I mean, that's not why we're reaching out to the auto industry right now, is not just HD specifically. Actually, we don't have to talk about that so much because pretty much all the car manufacturers have HD. And the real issue is which models is HD standard in. So, it's hard. We don't want to overstep our bounds and start suggesting that of course we advocate for the use of the technology in the vehicles, but ultimately it's up to the car makers to position their models in the marketplace. So we're certainly supportive of it. But anyway, listen, thanks everybody. I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Dave.